Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Oh, there's not to eat. Oh, okay, okay, okay. I'll make sure. Well, welcome, Hugo. See you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Oh, I got water here. Okay, that's fine. Thanks. Okay, so this is an interesting chapter indeed. We are on the third canto, chapter 12, and this has a lot to do with Brahma and creation. We'll give a little context before we begin. First, how many planets are there in the Milky Way, or stars in the Milky Way, our galaxy that we live in?
A lot.
How many? Anybody know? I believe the answer is 400 million, something like that. Huge number. And how many galaxies are there?
At least 2 trillion.
Yeah.
That we can see.
Yeah, and of course we can't see them all because light travels. How fast does light travel? In a vacuum, 186,000 miles a second. So some of the light we're looking at may be 14 billion years old, but beyond that, we don't know. Light hasn't reached us. So the universe is extremely vast. Now, there's a Sanskrit, the word universe is an English word, obviously, and Sanskrit has several different words that end up being translated as universe. So at the BI, the Bhaktivinoda Institute, we kind of try to deconstruct some of this. But we know there are many universes. So we see these distant galaxies. Is that our universe, another universe? These are points that we're not quite sure of the answers, but we know it's very vast, extremely vast. And each universe has a Brahma in it. The Brahma is a creative energy. Now, there was a story that some of you may know in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the story is told that our Brahma went to Vaikuntha and knocked on the door to see Vishnu. I don't think they had a Ring doorbell in those days, but whatever. He knocked, and the guards came, and they said, "Can I help you?" He said, "Oh yeah, I'm Brahma, actually Vishnu. I'm the creator of the universe. I'm the powerful one. In probably the equivalent we talk about the Norse or the gods of Rome or Greece. There's equivalent demigods, and every society talked about this." So he knocks on the door and says, "I'm Brahma." And the guards go, "Which Brahma?" "Brahma, hey, there's one Brahma." He goes, "Which Brahma?" He goes, "Oh, the four-headed Brahma." "Oh, okay, let me check." Vishnu said, "Come on in." And Lord Brahma says, he said, "Which Brahma?" And at that moment, by his mystical potency, Lord Vishnu signaled many Brahmas from many universes to come. Maybe these are the galaxies we're seeing, maybe not. Could be, very well could be. No one's quite sure of these details. And all these Brahmas show up. But the Brahmins, by the magic potency of the Lord, can't see each other. Only our Brahma, smaller Brahma, which is 4 heads. Some of these Brahmins have 1,000 heads because their vast universe is much bigger than ours. And so the Brahmas show up, and only our Brahma could see the others. And they all get there, and they all at once offer obeisances. So Vishnu, and all their heads hitting the ground with their helmets, a sound you can't even imagine. I mean, louder than the cheering at the stadium when the Gators get a touchdown, which you can hear in this building. I mean, super loud, louder than the garbage trucks on Wednesday morning coming by here. And the Lord Vishnu asked the Brahmins say, "How we may serve you? You asked us to come. Oh, how's everything in your universe?" The Brahmins go, "Things are cool. Things are fine. Thank you. Go back and manage." And this was for our Brahma to make him humble, to understand that there's so many, even our Brahma is so great, so proud, running the whole universe, our universe at least, creator, and he's so humble. And that's a story once told by Prabhupada. There was one of Prabhupada's foremost generals. Some of you may know the story, if so, it's certainly worth repeating. He's one of the foremost generals in the entire movement. He passed on 20 some odd years ago, Tamal Krishna Goswami, but he was Prabhupada's chief general. And nobody was more loyal or competent than he was. And I knew him very well. And it's just a competence on top of competence. So at that point, he wasn't even a Swami yet. He was temple commander of the young LA temple. And because he was temple commander, he was getting a little proud about it. You walk around with your clipboard and tell people what to do. Any of you ever do that? Walk around with your clipboard and tell people what to do. You feel a little power and authority. The clipboard was like the scepter a king has. I assign you Chaitanya, get the toilets today. Yes, wait, you get the pots. This is the power. So Prabhupada goes to Tamal Krishna. He says, look out at this night sky. All those planets, there are millions of planets and universes, and they're all inhabited. And then we're on this one earth. And on this one earth, there are so many countries. And in each country, there are so many cities. And in America, there's so many cities. And we're in a city that's not even the biggest city, but a large city. And in this city, there are so many buildings and blocks. And we're on this one block, La Cienega. And there's so many buildings on this block, and there's this one building here, and you are the temple commander of this building, and you think you're so important. And he understood the lesson. So some of this vastness of the universe that we may never fully understand, because as Sukadeva Goswami says in the 5th canto, you really can't understand all this. Some of it is just to make us awestruck. Somebody give me an example that's very appropriate for today or beginning last night of an example where Krishna wanted to just show that sometimes we just have to be awestruck and can't understand it all. Then we'll get into the verse. Can somebody give me an example? Very appropriate example of Krishna just trying to go to his dear devotees and just bewildering them by, hey, this whole cosmic manifestation is beyond what you can fully grasp. Yeah. Say again? Go in detail and with a microphone.
Krishna Damodar, bewildering his mom.
Say again?
Krishna Damodar, bewildering her mom.
How?
By not being able, but many ways, but one way we're celebrating now, she couldn't tie him up.
And another way, she looked in Krishna's mouth and saw all the universes, as did Arjuna. So sometimes Krishna will manifest various ways just to give us a little sense of humility, as Prabhupada did with Tamal Krishna Goswami. And by the way, the Tamal Krishna Goswami story is very relevant for the verses we're going to do today, because what did Tamal Krishna do? He completely accepted that not so subtle chastisement by Prabhupada. So we're verses, let me see, I got it here. We have verses 3, 12, 21 to 33, not that I'm going to read them all, and we're going to focus on 28. So let me see, 21, I have that bookmarked. Okay. Let me see. Okay, let's begin with 21. Do we have the Sanskrit there? Yeah, that should just click on that. It'll bring it right up. There it is. Who's a good verse chanter wants to chant the verse? Who's a good chanter?
There's a section of verses we need to cover.
I know. We're just going to chant the Sanskrit for one verse. Yeah.
Usually we read first.
I like doing things in reverse. Shake it up a little when people fall asleep. I know, but thank you. That's good. Who would like to chant that verse? Go for it. Go for it. Way in the back. I don't have my binoculars. I'm sorry.
Ata vidyayataha sargam putraha prajasmire yuktasya
Okay, thank you. Now read the English.
Brahma, who was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of generating living entities and begot 10 sons for the extension of the generations.
Okay. Marichi, Atriya, Angira, a long list of names, were thus born. Narada was born from the deliberation of Brahma, which is the best part of his body. Vasitha was born from his breathing, Daksha from his thumb, Burga from his touch, and Kratu from his hand. So Narada is the best son, the transcendental spaceman, we might say. So we're going to go on. And then the various verses say where different entities were generated from Brahma. Now, sometimes we may wonder how this quite works, because it, well, you know, I don't see people being born from ears and everything, but actually in nature, really weird stuff goes on. We just did a film at the Bhakti Institute by Ishwara Krishna called the Nature's IQ, and how animals are born and do things. They're born in all kinds of odd circumstances, and you have hermaphroditic animals. I mean, in which they're both man and women, and they fertilize themselves somehow, and creatures are born. And you know, you have lizards. How are lizards born? Somebody tell me. Eggs, but that's not always true. Some lizards in cold climates give live births. And there are creatures deep in the ocean that it's how they reproduce is so odd, and the explanations, when you read it, it's just fascinating. And it puts evolutionary theory in a bad light, because you can't explain how such things would happen. So there are worms. You cut them in half and you get two worms, and they both crawl away. I've done that in biology class way back in high school, where you take certain creatures, the paramecium, little creatures, or even worms, and you cut them in half. You're not killing them, and two of them crawl away. And how these things happen. So if you go, what's the most inhospitable place on the earth? Where in the ocean? There's one particular place considered the most inhospitable place on the entire planet. Somebody tell me where it is. Yes.
The Mariana Trench.
Even more than that. But Mariana Trench, which is deeper than Mount Everest, is very inhospitable. But there's a place that's even more inhospitable, but that's a good one. Anybody know? Yes.
Can't think of a name, but it's where the volcanic and high temperatures.
Yeah.
Underneath the water.
And it comes up to the surface in Iceland. So if you follow Iceland is just this mid-Atlantic ridge where the North American continent's moving apart from the European continent, and there's deep in the ocean, there are volcanoes, and they're like 3 miles deep. So the pressure is crushing. I mean, just intense pressure. I mean, you go 20 feet down in a swimming pool, you can feel it in your ears, but imagine down 3 miles down. And then beneath, at the very bottom of the ocean, there are volcanoes shooting lava up. So the water is boiling water, and the water is always 4 degrees centigrade. It's always just above freezing at the bottom of the ocean. So you have this, because that's the densest water. But so you have this super dense water, super cold, that's being superheated by volcanic rocks, and and it's the most inhospitable place on earth, and there's life there. So every place is suitable for life. Life can be produced in many ways beyond what we can imagine. That's the only point being made here. So we might say this is too weird, but if you study nature, it's equally as weird. So I just wanted to give some faith in what's going on here. So we're gonna jump ahead a little bit to verse 27 and 28. So Kardama, sage Kardama, husband of the great Davahuti, was manifested from the shadow of Brahma. Thus all became manifest either from the body or mind of Brahma. So from the body or mind, Brahma could manifest. Then, Ovidura, we have heard that Brahma had a daughter named Vak, who was born from his body and who attracted his mind towards sex, although she was not sexually inclined towards him. Now, it's considered in any society, a father who would be sexually attracted to his daughter is considered one of the most heinous crimes there are. And I know people who have been in that situation, were sexually abused by their father. It's probably considered one of the worst crimes there are. Somebody who does that crime and goes to jail suffers a double fate. Because when they're in jail, even the other prisoners are so horrified by that crime if they find out that person is not treated very well. Not at all, to say the least. And the guards are so disgusted by that, they look the other way. So that it's considered the worst of crimes. So here, Brahma, who is this great personality, kind of got a little disturbed by his own daughter. So, Balavan Indriya Gramo Vidvamsam Api Karsati. It is said that the senses are so mad and strong that they can bewilder even the most sensible and learned man. Therefore, it is advised that one should not indulge in living alone with one's mother, sister, or daughter. So I'm going to jump ahead a little. Maitreya hesitated to state this anomaly on the part of Brahma, who is sexually inclined to his own daughter. But he mentioned it because sometimes it happens. And the living example is Brahma himself. Although he is the primeval living being, the most learned within the whole universe, if Brahma could be a victim, then what of others who are prone to do so? The extraordinary immortality on the part of Brahma was heard to have occurred in some particular kalpa. In other words, it wasn't our particular Brahma. This is a story about another Brahma. Remember, many Brahmas showed up. There's Brahmas all over, and there's Brahmas all over in time. So there's two levels here. Brahmas in the past time and many Brahmas present. So this is some Brahma in the past. So it's telling a story. It's not necessarily not about our Brahma particularly, though our Brahma did have his own incident, but not with his daughter, but that's another story. So Brahma, because our own Brahma heard directly from the Lord the essential verses of the Bhagavatam. And after giving him lessons in the Bhagavatam, our own Brahma would never be bewildered. This indicates that before hearing of the Bhagavatam, he might have fallen victim. But by hearing the Bhagavatam, he would no longer be able to be a victim. And that's one of the points. So one should take serious note, Prabhupada says, of this incident. The human being is a social animal, and his unrestricted mixing with the fair sex leads to downfall. Says social freedom of man and woman, especially among the younger section, is a stumbling block. Material bondage is due only to sexual bondage, and therefore unrestricted association is an impediment. And Maitreya cited this example. Then we go on. So the next verse, finding their father so deluded on an act of immortality, the sages headed by Marichi, all sons, spoke as follows with great respect. "O father, this performance in which you are endeavoring to complicate yourself was never attempted by any other Brahmin, nor by anyone else in the previous kalpa, nor will anyone dare to attempt in the future. You are the supreme being in the universe. So how is it you want to have sex with your daughter and cannot control your desire? Even though you are the powerful being, this act does not suit you because your character is followed for spiritual improvement." In other words, yada yada, trati straitas, whatever the great men do, the common men follow. And So when Brahma saw all this happen, he became very embarrassed. He actually left his body. He became very embarrassed. And Prabhupada discusses in the purport that why did this incident happen? Well, one, Brahma had not heard the whole Bhagavatam yet, hadn't been completely purified. So we're not completely purified. There is danger at every step, and try to show the example. Now, I'm going to tell a story that will surprise some of you. Anybody surprised yet? Okay. I got back from India in 1972 and I did something really, really weird for devotees in those days. Really weird. I went to graduate school. Because generally, in the early days of the movement, the devotees who joined were, Brahmananda, Harikesh, Gargamuni, they were all college graduates. Then after that, the devotees that joined weren't college graduates. Later on, Prabhupada established the BI to encourage an educated group within ISKCON. By that time, a lot of people were joining, no longer were, and going back to school was considered weird. But I did. And I had blessings from Prabhupada to do such. But I would all the time go to the New York Temple. And I noticed something interesting, because I was, you might say, an observer. And as Prabhupada would refer to his students, the boys and girls would all go on Sankirtan and Harinam, and they would jump in a Sankirtan van. And they would jump in the van, it would be elbow to elbow. And sometimes, girls next to boys. And they'd do Harinam and chant and distribute books. And there were virtually no affairs going on. No, as we say, hanky-panky. Virtually none. Then I watched this. The first wave of devotees came back from India around 1973. Prabhupada called for a lot of devotees to go to India because there were virtually no Indian disciples of Prabhupada for years. Even when Prabhupada left the planet, there were very few Indian disciples. Now, of course, hundreds of thousands of Indians are part of the movement, but then there were virtually none. So Prabhupada called for his Western disciples to go to India because he wanted to establish the holy places, Vrindavan, Mayapur. He used to say, Mayapur is my home, Vrindavan's my spiritual retreat, and Bombay's my office. And he wanted to establish these three centers particularly because he felt that was a brilliant strategy. So the first wave of devotees come back. What? They wanted something. They wanted culture. Because most devotees kind of came from hippie background, and we had in those days rejected our parents' culture. And the motto was, what was the motto we had that had to do with age 30? Don't trust anyone over 30. Because there was no one in the movement over 30. Yeah. No one. Who here is over 30? You see? Okay. But we didn't. Okay. So we don't trust anyone over 30. So we were desperate for culture, really hurting. And then devotees saw Northern Indian culture, which is heavily influenced by the Islamic invaders. And they said, that is Vedic culture. And it wasn't. And we started doing things that Prabhupada never authorized. Women had to be in the back of the temple room. Women had to be totally separate from men. And eventually devotees wrote a letter to Prabhupada. We don't want women chanting japa in the temple room. Prabhupada said, enough's enough, and said, if that's how you feel, you can't chant japa in the temple when there are women there, go off to the woods alone. A very strong point. So what happened is when the mixing of men and women became too separated, then the affair started. I watched it. So what's the lesson here? The lesson is indiscriminate mixing, we have the rule of 3 at Krishna House, for example, which is very effective. Indiscriminate mixing of men and women will result in the situation like Brahma, in which people's minds will be very disturbed and there'll be difficulties. Artificial separation, it will also result in the same thing. Now, if somebody is a very staunch brahmacharya, brahmacharini, and it's their choice, they want to be extra cautious in associating with the opposite sex. That's their privilege. That's their right. And it may even be their duty. But as an institution, if we make too much mixing or too much artificial separation, it results in great difficulty. And that's one reason Krishna House works, because we have one key word. And the key word was, the key word was memorialized in a wonderful song. I'm going to play the song for you in a moment. And this is what works. And then we're going to get to something about this verse that's very interesting. So I should have queued this up, but it's one of those days in which I didn't do it. I should do it. Okay, here it goes. There is okay.
What you want, baby, I got it. What you need, you know I got it. All I'm asking is for a little respect, just a little bit, hey, baby, just a little bit, hello, just a little bit, mister, just a little bit. I ain't gonna do it wrong. Where you go? Ain't gonna do it wrong. I don't know.
Okay, the name of that song is R-E-S-P-E-C-T, respect. Tara recognized it. Respect. And often when I do mediations, I'll play that song at the beginning to set the tone. And it always has an effect. And so the key is respect. And that's what happens in the next verse here. So, and in the purport, Prabhupada says a very interesting statement about respect. And he says, the great sages like Marichi were not wrong in submitting their protests to their great father. They knew very well that even though their father committed a mistake, there must have been some purpose behind the show. Otherwise, how could such a great personality commit such a mistake? It might be, Prabhupada says, that Brahma wanted to warn his subordinates about human frailties in their dealings with women. This is always very dangerous for persons who are on the path of self-realization. Therefore, great personalities like Brahma, even when in the wrong, should not be neglected, nor could the great sages headed by Marichi show any disrespect. In other words, when they saw a discrepancy, they didn't get on the internet and start flaming Lord Brahma. Did you hear what Brahma did? Did you do that? And you do it. They didn't start flaming Brahma like we do nowadays. They approached him with respect. Hey, Brahma, we're bewildered by this. And in the back of their mind, maybe Brahma had a purpose. Prabhupada gives example. If you see a great sage walk into a bar, don't assume he's getting a drink. He may be going in to preach, or he may be walking out with a drink. It could go either way. But it's somewhat, yeah, it's somewhat the benefit of the doubt. One time, the president of Vrindavan Temple, who was a dear friend of mine, was visiting me. And I offered him a drink with hops and malt. It was a totally non-alcoholic beer. Nothing sinful about it. It just has, nice ingredients. So I offered it to him. I happen to have one there. Would you like something cold, hot day? He said, sure. So we're having it. Somebody rings my doorbell. Another devotee comes in. I say, this is a totally non-alcoholic, just hops and malt. It's good for the nerves. Would you like one? He goes, no, thank you. Next thing I know, on the internet, Brahma and Panchagoda, I visited, they were having a beer. That really happened.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this is the nature of social media, Kali Yuga. These things happen. That's not the only incident. Seeing many things like that. So the lesson here is when we see a discrepancy with a senior person, we get the benefit of the doubt and we question them about it. In this case, Brahma was guilty, but as Prabhupada said, there was a reason for it. It was almost like a pastime. But Brahma himself, being Brahma and being a great personality, not our Brahma, it's different, it's happened way in the past, different Brahma, different kalpa, different time. He actually gave up his body. He was so embarrassed by it. So this is kind of a lesson on how we deal with things. And it's a lesson on the nature of sexuality. In that, there's a aphorism, might come from Chanakya Pandit, I don't remember, but one does not contemplate the sex life of others. Even we have the story of Ajamil, great devotee, brought up in a Brahmin family, and he saw some Sudras embracing in a sexual position and become so agitated he became very fallen. So one of the lessons is we want to keep our minds pure. We don't contemplate those kind of things. Some people even get disturbed seeing animals copulating. Things like that happen. So we don't contemplate. At the same time, we don't wear blinders and pretend that these things don't go on in the world. And I gave that story, what happened when devotees came back from India. One devotee came back from India, very nice devotee. I won't mention his name, it's still around, but he's a professor at a college. He came back from India after 3 months in India. American, New York guy. He came back with a heavy Bengali accent. I didn't get a Bengali accent because Prabhupada had a heavy Bengali accent. He thought that's what we're supposed to do. That's called imitating, not following in footsteps. So the lesson was not to imitate that northern Indian culture, whatever it was, but to follow in the footsteps of Prabhupada's instructions. And the instructions here are to be very cautious about sexual matters. Now, I had to give a lecture to the devotee generation that are in their 40s now, kids that grew up in the movement. And they asked me to give a lecture on the 4 regulative principles. This was Namamrita, Yogeshwar's son organized it. So the name of my lecture was No Meat, Fish, or Eggs, and what the hell's the other one? Because what I discussed, you need a title to get people to show up. What I discussed was the regulative principles are always arranged. I'll give an example. If I would buy stock in a company, I'd buy stock in telephone company, I'd say, total gambling for me. Even my chart says don't do it. Just my brain doesn't work that way. Somebody else, it's a business investment. So somebody else is gambling, but what's gambling for me is investment for others. Prabhupada was in New Vrindavan. This happened more than once. He gave the detailed recipe on how to make wine. Anybody know that story? Detailed recipe. And then he ended, by the way, don't do that. Of course, for digestive purposes, sometimes it's useful. Many devotees will love taking Ayurvedic medicine, which is basically, the tinctures are basically herbs dissolved in vodka. That's what it is. And one of the senior devotees of the movement, Prabhupada left, started taking it and became an alcoholic and actually fell down from his position. So take the regulative principle of meat eating. Harikesh, one time, there was a blonde, older lady dancing at Artik in Calcutta Temple in the early 70s. Now, you don't see a white, older lady visiting the Calcutta Temple. Same temple we still have now for those who have been to Calcutta, been there forever. You don't see them dancing at Artik. And devotees, dull as we are, didn't say anything, ignored it. And Prabhupada saw her and said, wait, that doesn't make sense. What's an older white lady doing dancing at Artik who's not a devotee? I mean, somebody in their 50s. You don't seem to be in their 50s. We didn't trust anybody over 30 anyway, but it was in their 50s. And Prabhupada said, find out who she is. And she was the Consulate General of Poland's wife. And she loved Artik. Now, what was Poland's political situation in 1972? Somebody tell me.
Under Russian rule.
Soviet, part of the Soviet Union. It was a communist country, and the Iron Curtain was there. There was no question of getting visas for Americans to visit. Prabhupada saw an opportunity. And he said, ask her, when he found out who she was, if she can get visas. And what did she do? She went to her husband and got visas for 3 Westerners to go to Poland behind the Iron Curtain. Her husband just stamped the passports. So Harikesh and 2 others went to Poland. You know the story, Tara? So they went to Poland. They went in the winter. And when they went there in the winter, there was nothing to eat but meat, unless you were rich and they had no money. And they'd get a few nuts, a few, little bit here and there. When they came back, successful preaching in Poland. When they came back, they were emaciated, so thin. And Prabhupada saw them and said, what happened to you? Harikesh said, there was nothing to eat. And Harikesh told me the stories. It's not third hand. There was nothing to eat there, Prabhupada, but meat. But we preached. And Prabhupada said, there was nothing to eat but meat. It was nothing but meat, unless you were very rich and we had no money. And Prabhupada said, then eat meat. And Harikesh goes, what about my consciousness? And Prabhupada says, damn your consciousness, preach. Now, I asked Harikesh in detail about this. You know the story, Gandhini? You know that one. If I'm telling it wrong, correct me. But, and all of you who don't know Gandhini, she's the associate director of the BI. Thanks for coming. So I asked Harikesh, Prabhupada did not intend for him to eat meat, but he wanted to make a point. And the point was preaching is the main thing. If there's nothing else to eat on the planet, that may be what one has to do. Bhaktisiddhanta said when they opened a restaurant, he said, if you have to serve meat to get people to come to eat prasadam, serve meat if it will get people to come eat prasadam. Again, they didn't do it. I don't think it was anyone's intent to serve meat, but trying to make the point that if the regulative principles are the principles that guide us, they're the principles that enable us to improve our consciousness, to raise our consciousness. But these same principles, when according to the Upadeshamrita, the same principles, if followed fanatically, can actually be a source of fall down, can actually be a source. So the point is to really understand what's going on a deeper level. So again, Prabhupada did not intend for anyone to eat meat. We know that. Prabhupada certainly wanted at all costs to avoid illicit sex, at all costs avoid speculative matters, certainly avoiding intoxication because, what it does to us. There was one time I was doing a political party at my house. My friend was running for mayor, and a very good friend, and a strict vegetarian. And we had become friends at a convention. We're both environmentalists, and we were the only two veggies. So we ate our meals, and eventually she became mayor and was running. So I invited her to my house, and I had 100 people come. They called a meet and greet. And we had all kinds of nice prasadam. And we had a little Harikesh came, we had a little Bhajan band. And everyone that came almost visited the temple room and said, how is that room so special? It was a nice opportunity. And then at these engagements, they typically serve alcohol. So I had carbonated grape juice, basically, non-alcoholic champagne and wine, like that. My neighbor came, and being a good neighbor, he thought he would bring something and brought a real bottle of some kind of liquor, or champagne or something, but I didn't know it. And he put it on the table. And then I handpicked a dozen devotees to come who are very good at mixing. These are the high elites of Gainesville, the most important people in Gainesville, who are good at mixing with them. And then all of a sudden, these devotees I brought are speaking loudly. They hadn't had a drink in 30 years.
Oh my God.
And they're walking around, talking loud, and acting weird. I couldn't figure out what is going on here. What's going on? Because they had had the first drink in 30 years. So that's a warning to us. Once we purify our mind that way, we can never go back. We just can't. If we do, it's so degrading. One time in the early days, they were having some program in San Francisco, and they had a punch bowl, and somebody dropped LSD in the punch bowl. Same thing happened. And as devotees, when we purify our mind, and that happens, and same thing, like when we purify our minds and we're really, we really know not to be frivolous with the opposite sex, and we start doing it, immediately everything goes wrong. One drink, everything went wrong. I had to quickly get rid of that bottle and stuff the devotees in my temple room and shut the door.
Oh.
So these things happen. But it is 8:30. We can go on and on with these topics. Let's take one or two questions and then we'll stop. Any questions or comments? Yes, Gandhi. Whoever asks something, please take a microphone.
There's a few things on my mind, and we wouldn't have time to explore all of them. I guess one thing I'd like to ask about, you mentioned about the devotees coming back from India, and then kind of a lot of cultural changes became injected into ISKCON, and that caused issues, and I've heard that before. Over a few years of practicing Krishna consciousness, meeting many sanghas, being in many temples, encountering many devotees, I've seen that there's like different sources of cultural and social truth in our devotee community, where it's like there's things that Srila Prabhupada instructed and did, and there's things which are done in ISKCON, there's things which are done in Gaudiya Vaishnav communities, there's things which are done in Bengal, there's things which are done in India, and there's kinds of these different categories. And in many ways, they interrelate, and there's a lot of similarity. And at the same time, over years, I found like there's discrepancies between those different sources that all kind of come into play as like a mixing pot in the devotee communities that we know and love. And I find it can be difficult to really distinguish like what's coming from where, and has now become truth from a source that's been lost from 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 years ago. I'm curious what you would say on that.
Yes. Oh, okay. Next question. Okay, so the cultural is a very difficult matter. There are two dangers, and they're both equally as dangerous. One is getting too absorbed in a ritualistic culture, which Prabhupada warned of the dangers many times. The other is ignoring tradition. So how to do a middle road. One problem we have, not at Krishna House, but many places, we become temples. So there's one temple I know, I won't name it, in which they advertise in their newsletter, when you buy a new car, bring it here and we'll do the blessings for you. There's one story I can tell about this. It was in a Miami temple in the 80s. We had a very zany pujari, and everything that came that had to be blessed. And what he did is we got a new refrigerator for the restaurant, but it was the wrong one. And it was bought on Miami Beach from a Jewish shop. And so they called up the shop, said, it's the wrong refrigerator you sent. So they sent this old Jewish guy to pick it up with his hand cart. But meanwhile, the devotee, the zany devotee, had blessed the refrigerator, and inside the refrigerator, he had drawn a blood red swastika, which is quite, quite the Vedic symbol. And so this old Jewish guy comes, he's all freaked out by all these people and, bed sheets and mismatched socks and everything. And he walks in to get the refrigerator, and he opens the door and sees the blood red swastika. And he goes, I was watching that, he goes shrieking out the temple. Ah! Runs out the door. Yeah, I could still see the look on his face. He didn't know if we were going to put him in the gas chambers or what. And so that's ritual gone amok. That really was. And I knew the Pujari, and he and I used to do programs together. A decent, extremely zany person. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is in which we don't accept the culture. I'll give another example that would be a little, maybe less example of time for. I just did a little wedding ceremony. Many of you were here Friday night for Shruti and Surya. Now, about, 8 years ago or something, I did a wedding ceremony for two devotees who lived at Krishna House. Who here knows Tulsi Rani and Rupa Chandra? Anybody know them? You know them. Sweetest devotees. They'll be coming for Shruti's wedding. Wonderful devotees. And they're both living in Krishna House. He from Singapore, Indian Christian family, and she was from a Jewish family. And she had promised her father she would have a Jewish wedding. And her father had died. So she wanted a Jewish Krishna wedding at New Roman Reiki. So she approached me as the resident rabbi. Can you do this? With Chadaratma doing the so-called Vedic side and me doing the Jewish side. So I said, okay. So I dressed up in all the paraphernalia, that the prayer shawl and the skull cap and all of these things. What's that? Say that. No, the side seekers, and I didn't have side seekers. So, and then Chadaratma, dear friend, did the Vedic side, and we did a joint wedding ceremony at New Roman Reiki. So her mother was there, honoring her father, and the parents of Rupa Chandra were there, who were, Christian Indian. So everyone loved it. It worked out well. I have amazing pictures I can show you of this. And then as soon as the wedding was over, I jumped on an airplane I didn't even take a feast because I had a board meeting of the Bhakti Center in New York. And I had to be there. As soon as I got to the temple, Radhanath Swami greeted me. He says, "Oh, I heard you did the wedding ceremony for my disciple." And I said, "Oh, yeah." And then I asked him a question that answers your question, Hugo. I said, I studied hard to do this wedding right. And in the so-called Vedic, which is not Vedic, Hindu ceremony, there are 7 steps you do. And you're asking for blessings. May have many children, may have money, may have a nice house. It's the old gimme blessings. And the Jewish side had 7 things too, but it was all of them were related to what service can I do? How can I do service? So I said to Maharaj, I'm very bewildered. I thought I'm supposed to like the Vedic stuff better, but I like the Jewish wedding 10 times better than this Vedic wedding stuff. And he goes, of course. The so-called Hindu weddings, not the ones that Prabhupada never did like that, are all karma kanda. It's all karma kanda. Trying to, what blessings can I get? So that's the danger. The danger is we start treating our rituals like Amazon.com. Today's Prime Day. So what do you do on Amazon Prime Day? You get on your app and you order your merchandise. And if you're in certain cities, it'll be delivered the same day. All you have to do is put in your credit card and you get your new Kangol hat, which I have to order today. Thanks for reminding me. Okay, so that's karma kanda. That's what karma kanda looks like. So the danger is that we easily fall down to karma kanda. It's natural to fall, just like your body. If you don't shower every day, your body will become prey to BO very quickly. Everybody's like that. There's no exceptions to it, except some saints who always smell like perfume or something. But the rest of us, we get that flight to India, boy, do we need a shower. It's the same thing. If we don't engage in protecting our devotional life, we easily fall down to karma kanda. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get some reward. And the whole idea of service dissipates. So the key to answer your question is always cultivate the mindset to be of service. And if we do, then we rise above the cultural discrepancies that arise. I hope that answers your question. It's a very good question. With that, we've run out of time. I think we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Difficult subject matter, but now we're going to begin my absolute favorite prayer. It's time for my favorite prayer. Does anybody know what that is? Yes, of course.